We've got 5 similar videos ready to start this channel with, and they're all aimed at getting a career in AI. So they're very similar. I've just recorded the WordPress video. Don't know if you watched that first, and if not, it's irrelevant really, because we're learning the same technologies in both the WordPress and the Peppermint. There's a lot of overlap. So fundamentally, they're all to teach you simple, concise steps for an AI career. Each one uses Vagrant as the infrastructure as a code tool to make things easy to build, repeatable. There's an analogy called pets v cattle, whereas a server you've taken lots of care of and made it all unique, that's a pet. Whereas for a career, you're probably wanting ones that are more like cattle, so you can repeat it and build 10 or 20 or 30 or 40, all identical machines, all doing the same tasks with maybe a slight variation on their IP address or their host name. Also, we don't want you to have any outlay. You might be young, you might be starting out, you might be thinking of going to university, or you might be going, can I learn this without going to uni? And we'll certainly show you a lot, and give you a good idea of where you want to focus your learning after this. So if you've got spare capacity in your laptop or your desktop, we'll build a virtual machine, and otherwise we'll install Ubuntu on a Raspberry Pi or an old PC, and that should do it. And let us know in the comments if you like this format or if you've got any other ideas. So we've just built WordPress in the previous video, which is a blogging tool. This one is Peppermint, and it's a call login system. So if you're a company and your customers want to log faults for your system, this is what this does. The next video will be a shop based on Google's Kubernetes demo, which is excellent, and it teaches you about microservices and all sorts of good stuff. The next one is about the DeepSeek LLM. So obviously that's equivalent to OpenAI, but you can run it locally. And then we've got NAN, which is an AI automation tool. So people might just be interested in learning the automation and making a career out of the automation and tying out how the models do. And we'll tie the videos together in a blog or a book if there's interest. So if we've got, as you can see, it's basically the same thing on each machine. If you're using a virtual machine, it's the one on the left. So you get your Apple Silicon Mac with Vagrant and VMware underneath, and then inside we've got an Ubuntu based virtual machine that's going to have Docker Compose, and we're going to run the Docker Postgres image, which is a relational database, and Peppermint itself. So Peppermint needs a database under the covers, and if you're using a Raspberry Pi or an old PC, we'll just install it on the operating system. Pretty much the same steps. So if you're on the right hand side, so if you are on a Mac, you want to install iTerm2 as your SSH client, and if you're on a PC, you want to install Putty. Both awesome. And then if you're on a Raspberry Pi, you want to go to Raspberry Pi's website, download the imager, and make an Ubuntu server image, and that lets you do this. Raspberry Pi OS is probably better for the Pi, but it's not good for being commodity. So we'll use operating systems you're more likely to use in a career. Raspberry Pi is focused on hobbyist, and it's brilliant, but it's not what we're after in this case. So I'm an M1 MacBook Air, so it's Apple Silicon. So I'm going to use the VMware Desktop Hypervisor. You install it, you need a license for personal use. It'll give you a file, and then it'll all work. And if you're using Intel, either Intel Mac or a PC, you want to use VirtualBox, which is a brilliant product, and it looks like it's about to support ARM. So if we can use it for Apple Silicon, we'll use it shortly. And then the infrastructure as code tool is called Vagrant. It's by a company called HashiCorp, but it's just been bought over by IBM. So we're going to install Vagrant and the Vagrant VMware utility. So that's what we're going to install. We'll do a video in the future about slow-paced installs, and you can watch the installs on various PCs and stuff like that. But I think everybody watching this video will be able to install this on a Mac or a PC or a Raspberry Pi. So Vagrant, we're going to just use 3 Vagrant commands really. Vagrant up, which gets your Vagrant file and builds your environment. vagrant destroy minus F, which is force destroy, which just means we can wipe the environment. I like just to play with environments and wipe the end. Vagrant SSH lets you jump into the environment while it's operating if we need it. Or we can manually set up a VM, which I'll show you in another video. Or you can install Ubuntu on a Raspberry Pi or an old PC and we'll be good to go. So this is very similar to, well, it's pretty identical apart from the last few lines as the WordPress demo video we've just done. So the first few lines at the top, we're downloading the bento Ubuntu image. So that just means your operating system and your virtual machine is going to be Ubuntu. The provider we're going to have is VMware Fusion. We're going to use 4 gig of RAM and we're going to use two CPUs, which is a quarter of the capacity of this MacBook Air. The next line about the sync folder vagrant, that just means we want to stop chat between the Mac and the virtual machine. There's no need in a temporary demo. And then the next line is setting the IP address for it. My network at home is 192.168.1. Yours is going to be either the same or it's going to be 192.168.0. So that 1 might be a 1 or it might be a 0. And I've just picked a number at the high end of the GCHP range. So hopefully that IP is not in use. And then we've got the shell lines. So these lines are what you would run on a Raspberry Pi as well. Or an old PC. So the lines we've discussed so far are about the virtual machine, and then what we run within the virtual machine is the same on both systems. So we do a sudo apt update, which I've got a typo in, but you just assume there's an A there, and that goes and fetches the information where to download Docker from. The next line is commented out with the wee hash sign, which is apt upgrade. So that's the command you would use to patch your system. And if you're going to have the system running for weeks, we would probably patch it and have everything upgraded. But because this VM is going to have a lifetime of half an hour, there's not much point spending 10 minutes patching everything. UFW, that's the firewall. We want to disable the firewall. We don't want it getting in the way of what we're learning here. We've got enough stuff to learn without having to pad through a firewall. And same with the next two lines, they disable the app armor, which is another software security tool. The following two lines, I always put them in. They're to do with swap memory. If a computer, if it runs out of RAM, it goes and uses the disk. But if we've got a VM inside a VM, it gets quite complicated when things start paging and stuff like that. So I'd rather the system just crash when we run out of memory. We're not going to run out of memory in this demo. We've got plenty of capacity. There's no way we're going to get near 4 gig. But I use these lines because I would rather the computer crash when it runs out of memory rather than having to work out what's going wrong. The next line is just an IP address going to the host file. We don't need it for this. It's just because I cut and paste a template that I always use. So the next 5 or 6 lines are installing Docker, a network component Docker needs, and Docker Compose. And then the cat EOF, I've moved that onto a different screen to make it readable. So basically that's writing out the Docker Compose file, and then the final line, Docker Compose, run the file we're about to make. So the Docker Compose file, the compose.yaml we're going to make, it's going to reference the Postgres container and the peppermint container, and it's going to make a folder where we store the database data, PG data. It's actually going to live in the machine in varlib Docker volumes. It's only relevant if we want to keep this long term and we work out backup strategies, but the database writes its files on the virtual machine's file system, if that makes sense. The container itself doesn't get written to. So here is the file that we're going to write. That's inside the cat. And we've got 2 services. We've got Peppermint Postgres and Peppermint. So Peppermint Postgres, Postgres is just a relational database, and that's where we set the user and password for the user. So it's going to be Peppermint password, and we've got the Peppermint. And then the Peppermint service, we've got a container. It's going to listen in port 3000 and another port. It's going to restart it. It depends on Peppermint Postgres, so that just means on the system that Peppermint doesn't start until Peppermint Postgres is already running, and then it's got the credentials to get back in. Okay. Right, and the last demo, vagrant up. So this is going to build the vagrant environment. I didn't run through this on the WordPress demo, so we'll just see how easy this is. So we've just got the vagrant file, the vagrant up command runs it. So you can see it's checking, we've got the Ubuntu box, it's already got it downloaded. So it's going to start it up. It's going to now set up the network configuration where it grabs 192.168.1.253. That takes a couple of seconds. I actually always in my mind thought this took 10 minutes, but the WordPress took 2.5 minutes to run, so I thought we'll just record the whole thing from step to step, and everyone can see you don't have to do anything. The file's perfect, or at least it's perfect in an Apple Silicon. So it's still setting up the infrastructure. There we go. So that's it doing the update, the app update. So it can find files. It's just that's installing Docker. That's the network component. It's away fetching the Docker Compose. That's install Docker Compose. Now it's fetching the peppermint Docker file and the Postgres file. We'll get all this downloaded. Yeah, it doesn't take long actually. I've only got about a 20 meg network connection, so it's not that fast to the internet. It fluctuates quite a bit. If you're on fibre, this will only take a few seconds, but I'm in the sticks in Scotland, so that's about as fast as network as we can get without buying Starlink. The majority of these demos we're going to do in really cheap kit, and we'll just take time, and that way you can learn what's going on. We don't need to throw GPUs at things when we can run it on a Raspberry Pi, and if it takes 10 seconds to answer a question rather than a millisecond, that's cool for what we're going to do, and we can scale it in the cloud at the end. Maybe I can fast forward this. Is it downloading? Now it's extracting the images. We'll teach you how the learning works. There you go, that's the containers all up. Nice. So you can see it's all started. So this was what the WordPress demo was last time, but this time we're on the same IP address, but we're in port 3000. Nice. Right, let's see what. Can anyone remember what the credentials were? Yep, peppermint. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh. Peppermint. Right. I'll need to go to the documentation and remember the default password. Let's just go. Peppermint. And we've got the tells us what the default password is. Talks. Install my Docker. Docker compose. Admin.com. One, two, three, four. And there we go. Go to dashboard. And there's plenty of YouTube videos on how to work Peppermint and how to do all the call logging and everything. So thank you very much for watching that. And I'll remember to get the password first time. Thank you. Did I do that without it getting recorded?